Your thumbnail, your reel, your short, your brand. It was judged in 0.05 seconds. Not viewed, not considered, judged. Faster than you could blink, a verdict was already decided. Relevant or irrelevant? Should I watch or scroll? Worthy or not? And here's what makes this completely wild. That judgment happens before a single conscious thought is even formed. Before your brain knew what it was looking at, the decision was already made. And no, it wasn't because your content is bad. It's something worse than that. That number, 0.05 seconds, that is not a content tip. That is a neuroscience finding. And once you understand what's actually happening in that fraction of a second, you'll never think about your hook, your thumbnail, or the first second the same way again. I want to be clear about what this video is and what it isn't. This isn't a list of hook templates. There are no frameworks being sold here. This is the actual science, the neurobiology, the cognitive psychology, and the peer-reviewed research that explains why some hooks neurologically are impossible to ignore, and why others disappear before they're ever consciously seen. I spent a long time going deep on this: attention studies, dopamine research, auditory neuroscience, and cognitive load theory. And what I found is that the best creators in the world, whether they know it or not, are following 5 rules that the human brain wrote long before any of these platforms existed. And we're gonna go over those 5 rules now, and I'm gonna show you some examples of content that went viral from accounts that aren't technically famous, but they got massive attention. Why? Because the hook followed these 5 rules. Now, before I show you these rules, we need to stop comparing ourselves to goldfish. Attention spans are shrinking. Humans now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. That phrase, it's just not true. There is no large-scale, peer-reviewed evidence that the human biological capacity for sustained attention has structurally diminished. People still sit through 8-hour gaming sessions, binge watch a 3-hour video at 2 a.m., don't lie, 3-hour documentaries, and read 400-page books. The capacity for deep attention and deep focus is still inside of us. What has changed, though, is our environment. Our feeds are engineered to maximize screen time. So what has our brain done? It has become extraordinarily efficient at one thing: filtering. That means the brain is not distracted. It's actually just really good at filtering. Your brain is able to filter something interesting, not interesting, faster than ever before. And now that we know what the real problem is, we could actually solve with the right answer. And it brings this conclusion in our modern world. The hook is not just the beginning of the video. The hook is the video. As far as the algorithm is concerned, everything after is the reward for surviving the hook. So 5 rules, let's go through each one. The first rule you need to understand is going to be around dopamine, and most people have this completely wrong. Popular science calls dopamine the pleasure chemical, the reward you feel after something good happens. Though contemporary neuroscience tells us a different story. Dopamine is primarily a catalyst for wanting, which is why you refresh your Instagram for no reason. You weren't bored, you were hunting. And since you were hunting, you're seeking. So dopamine doesn't reward completion, it drives the search. And this is why scrolling feels impulsive. Every swipe releases a microdose of dopamine, not because the last video was good, but because the next one might be. And that uncertainty is the trigger. Scientists call this variable reinforcement. It's the same mechanism behind slot machines. Short-form videos trigger dopamine spikes of up to 47%. And over time, that creates tolerance, and the brain needs more, faster to feel anything. So what does that mean for your hook? Well, your hook has to give your brain something to pursue, a question it hasn't answered yet, a promise it hasn't collected on, not information, but a search. And the moment you tell them everything in the first sentence, the dopamine loop closes. There's nothing left to seek. And that means the hooks that work are not the most informative. They're the most unresolved. Let me show you what this looks like in the wild.
There's a building that is strategically designed to make you forget. There are no clocks, no windows.
Take a look at this reel from Emily Higgins. Her face appears for a half second. Then it cuts to a luxury hotel corridor. Single words appear on the screen at one time, with no clear explanation and no context. Just architecture and language that your brain can't stop trying to connect. She's not giving you information. She's giving you something to search for. The video has been viewed over 1 million times with 500,000 people who enjoyed the search as well. Now, if she took her script and reversed the order of the content, it would have flopped because it would have been informational and there would not have been a hook. The second rule is about something the brain does that most creators don't know exists. You know that feeling as you're driving and you arrive to your destination and you have no memory of the last 5 minutes? That is your brain on autopilot. And that's exactly the state your viewer is in when your video starts. When your viewer hits your video, they're not paying attention. Though we like to believe that, though that's what we're told. They're actually on autopilot, what neuroscientists call the default mode network. Yes, the visual cortex is active, but the prefrontal cortex, the part that makes conscious decisions, is largely offline. They're not watching, they're just moving. Breaking that state requires what's called a pattern interrupt, a stimulus that autopilot can't process automatically, which forces the brain's attentional network back online. The neurological mechanism behind this is called the mismatch negativity, or the MMN. Plain language, your brain is constantly predicting what comes next. So when something violates that prediction, a sudden sharp sound, an abrupt cut, a visual that doesn't belong, it fires a predictive error signal. Whoa, what is that? That's the MMN. And what's interesting is it fires before conscious thought. So it forces an involuntary shift towards the stimulus. Now, I know that sounds very heady, but top creators are using precisely calibrated auditorial and visual interrupts in those first 0.05 seconds to trigger the response. And this is not a creative touch. This is a neurological override. But here's the part that changes all of this. The MMN only buys you a moment. What follows immediately after is something called the P3A evaluative stage. And then the brain starts to ask, does this actually have value for me? If the answer is no, if the interrupt had no substance behind it, the swipe happens. The brain was interrupted, evaluated it, and decided wasn't worth the cost and went back to autopilot. Let me show you an example of this reel.
Life used to be quiet. Now it's loud. I used to have peace. Now it's wild.
What made you to decide to open the video the way you did, that first one you posted?
I definitely wanted to capture the audience with a visual hook. So in that first second, I say a word that I think is interesting, and then the scene switches to what I think is interesting. It goes from me sitting alone to me surrounded by kids, and then there's toys everywhere. Maybe that'll work. And it did. The story I was telling, the beginning was already enough to get you to stay. And then the slow zoom in, I think what was visually the part that may have saved that scene, you know? So that's why I just left it like that. It switched back to me sitting alone. I think by then the average person wants to hear the rest of whatever I'm going to say.
Your brain has no predictive model for that transition. That scene switch is the MMN firing. Alongside the words he was saying, he interrupted the autopilot.
But there is something interesting there about how you presented information, a story, captivated, that worked really well in this format.
That's the first video. That format worked. After that first video, I wanted to post one that was more along the lines of what I thought would work. And that was the gospel in 1 minute. I thought that one was going to be the one that went crazy. I thought, oh, this is going to have 25 million views. I'm very positive thinking. But then I realized the one that didn't go viral is more, it's just a lack of change of scenery. You know, I'm outside, I'm talking to the camera. It's passionate. I think it's good content. I think the wordplay is good. I think the poetry is good, but it's just another person talking to you, another person preaching to you. That's what I feel. Then I replicated that formula. I think the reason that format goes viral is because the topic is good, the music is good, the angles change. In the middle of each video, there's a switch, a very aggressive switch. One thing they all have in common is they start off with a little bit of my own personal drama and baggage. And I think that is so key right now.
So it's an interruption first, then substance second, and that leads into the content of the video. That's the rule. The third rule comes from a 1994 paper out of Carnegie Mellon, and every great hook is built on it. There's an economist named George Lowenstein, and he published a foundational research paper on curiosity. His core finding: curiosity is not triggered by ignorance. It's triggered by an awareness of a gap between what you know and what you want to know. In other words, you can't want to know something you don't know exists. But the moment you're aware there is a piece of critical information missing, the gap opens. The brain registers it is an unsolved problem, a cognitive itch that demands resolution. And that itch feeds directly back into rule 1. The dopamine wanting system kicks in, driving the behavior required to close the gap, which is doing what? Watching the rest of the video. And here's where most hooks fail. They open with a gap that is either too narrow or too wide. And the reason this is a problem is the brain can't even try to begin to form a question to try to find an answer to. It's either too vague or too confusing. Notice what's happening right now. If you are this far in the video, you've heard 3 rules and you know there are 5. The gap is open, and that's not an accident. The 4th rule is about emotion. Specifically, why negative hooks work and why overusing them will quietly kill your channel. As we know, research tracking emotional states during content consumption show a documented preference for negative or high arousal stimuli. That is why political content and confrontational content does really well. And this is why news stations often lead with negativity. Scientists call it the negativity bias. Humans attend to, learn from, and respond to negative information faster and more deeply than positive information. Why? Because threats demand attention, while positive information, it can wait. In practice, if you have a hook that is built on warnings, contrarian claims, negativity, or potential loss, that is going to generate a heightened sense of attention. These types of hooks will activate the same threat detection circuit in humans used to survive physical danger. And that's why they work. But thankfully, algorithms do measure long-term user satisfaction. So rage bait spikes initial viewers, but it will destroy your long-term distribution. Because if users report lower satisfaction and higher psychological fatigue, they are going to use the apps less. So the rule here is you could use it, but don't overuse it. This is like salt in a recipe. A little bit is just right, but too much and everyone knows. Now, you may have seen content out there that says something like, these are the top 3 biggest mistakes I made in my 20s. And those are a great use of this rule, but the tips that they give would actually be a reward and valuable information rather than fear-mongering. There is genuine utility in using this type of framework to allow someone to know what is at stake. So you could open with some type of negativity bias, but then you immediately transition into something genuinely useful. Now, the 5th rule is one that most creators never realize they're breaking, because it is invisible until you know to look for it. Cognitive load theory, which was developed by educational psychologist John Sweller, describes the limits of working memory. Now, when those limits are exceeded, comprehension collapses and the viewer leaves. Most creators think they have one hook, their spoken opening line. They don't. There are actually 3 firing at the exact same moment. And if you've ever seen Callaway's content online, you're gonna know that these 3 hook methods are actually scientifically based. And those 3 hooks are the visual hook, what catches your eye in those first 50 milliseconds. We're talking about the motion, the contrast, a face, something unexpected. Then we're talking about the text hook, what the brain reads on its first glance, ideally somewhere between 2 to 7 words. Then third, the spoken hook, what comes out of your mouth in those first few seconds, as well as any sound effects or music in the background. But did you know that these 3 land in a specific order, in the order I shared them? First it's visual, then it's text on the screen, and then it's what the listener hears. And this is the same thing for YouTube. When you think about the title, the thumbnail, and the text on the thumbnail, these things all trigger interest. Now, as you could tell, this all starts to lead to a whole different category of questions when you're thinking about your hook. You're no longer asking, is my hook good? Start asking, are all 3 of my hooks saying the exact same thing? The visual hook, the auditorial hook, and the text hook. That's the question you bring to your next video before you hit publish. Every hook that's ever stopped a scroll, knowingly or not, was following these rules. If you want to put these into practice on your own content, I have been building a tool in public called Hook Faster, and it applies all of these rules to help you generate hooks. It is linked down below in the description if you want to get started today, and you can write your first 10 hooks for free with using that link. Now, let me know in the comments below which of these 5 rules stuck out to you the most and gave you insight for how you're going to produce your next video. If you want more content like this, subscribe, and with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.